Going back to my original story there, it was in 2001 when I really had all my aha experiences and was connecting behavior to and money together. I knew that money caused stress for a lot of people, which is also what kept them would push them back to their hardwired behavior. That you just go to your instinctive zone. But as I've done more research on this over the last 20 years, and particularly in the last few years, money absolutely causes stress for people. There's plenty of research, including from the American Psychological Association and other places around the world. Roughly 75% of people around the world are saying their stress comes from money.
Hello and welcome to the Healthy Wealth Experience. I'm your host, Chris Hall, and I'm very excited today to have my guest with me, Hugh Massie. He has done a ton of research on DNA assessments, linking genetics to financial decision making. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here, Hugh.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Chris, and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Off the air, I was saying when I had read about Hugh and what he's working on, it really just fits perfectly with healthy wealth, the healthy wealth experience. You can truly be wealthy unless you also are healthy. And I think this goes into a lot of that. We're going to talk a lot about that, but let's first start with the beginning. As always, how did you get to this spot? Where'd you go to school? What interests you in this to where you would further, dive into this?
So you can tell from my accent, Chris, I'm not from Atlanta, Georgia, where I currently live. I'm from much deeper south, Sydney, Australia. And so
Nice.
that's where I was educated and the first part of my career started. So I did my education at an all-boys boarding school in Sydney. Well, that was a lot of the that was 8 years of my 12 years at school.
Wow.
Then university in Sydney doing economics and accountancy. And I finished with all of that and then went into work at Arthur Andersen predominantly as a tax specialist for most of my career. And I was lucky to have a few years of my experience living in Singapore and Thailand. So I got pretty diverse uh, life and business experience. And I think in that journey of being a tax specialist where I had to often provide complex advice to companies and to wealthy individuals, families as well, that I had to be able to customize. If I was going to be successful with it, I had to be able to customize the advice provided. So the person asking me the question and wanting the advice may not be someone that wanted to read a lot of details. So I sort of learned to figure out that with different people. For some people, it was one page and a diagram, and this is the answer. And for other people, needed to see 100 pages. But of course, to get paid the exorbitant fees that our firm charged, you needed to be able to justify it. And so, I learned to structure how the advice was provided. And I think that was something that I was intuitively doing and not highly aware that I was doing that, as I am more aware of it today. And when I finished with Arthur Andersen, decided I'd had enough of corporate life and wanted to be doing something for myself, I went and set up a wealth management firm with the intention of providing a hyper-personalized experience. And again, I didn't know totally how that was going to pan out in terms of what the personalized experience process would be, other than I'm going to treat people uniquely as I can, and that this can't be a one-size-fits-all service. A few years into the business, a friend of mine asked, "What are you really passionate about?" And I said, "I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered." And that was a pretty life-changing moment in a lot of ways, because I hadn't thought of saying that my life purpose was that, or my passions at a deep level was that. But I knew enough that if I had said that, I need to go and do something with it. So I went and took a hard look at myself from a internal perspective. I looked in my day journal that I'd been writing for a few years, and there, on behold, I'd been writing about behavior. So I knew that to help people become financially self-empowered, Chris, it was not financial literacy in the normal way of teaching people stocks and bonds and compound interest and whatnot. It was teaching them about themselves, and that every person had a financial personality, and that I realized this could be measured. And then I have a chance meeting with a psychologist, and she says, look, this is what you're talking about is that people have got a natural hardwired behavior that's shaped from very early in life. And I could help you measure that because that's really what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And that become the basis of helping people with financial self-empowerment. Wrapped up in there as well is if I knew who the person was through what we would call today psychometric measurement, I could put a tailor-made suit on every client. That was really so that was one side of it. So I was meeting my hyper-personalization objective now, because now I was going to know the ins and outs of every person and what they would need, have a much better discovery process, but also be able to teach them what their wealth drivers would be what we would call the wealth mentor of the client, much better able to guide and coach them uh, on the wealth journey by knowing who they are. And so that's sort of how I got to this place.
Okay. It's
Very
some of the
purpose
things you
driven,
say.
really. Very purpose
What?
driven. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say some of the things you're saying. It's like we all know that, like it seems like in relationships, there's like a spender and a saver. So it's
Yeah.
very rare that you have two savers or I mean, and if you have two spenders, they don't usually come see a financial advisor. But
Well, they've
that's
got
really
no money
interesting
left
because I
over
mean,
to
we
do
all
it.
know
Yeah.
what's that.
They've got no money left to come and see the advisor.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I was saying, like, we know that from the 30,000 foot view that there's a spender and a saver, but you've actually dug down into, like, where we're at with it. How early in life do these um subsidies, whatever you would call it, nature versus nurture, how early in life do these kind of like set themselves in motion?
Yeah, so that's a a good question, and I'll be as specific as I can, that your hard wiring, which is what I'm seeking to measure, the natural instinctive behavior, is 85% formed or thereabouts by the time you're 3 years old. So the enduring traits that we all have are largely set by the time you're 3 years old. Now, where do they come from? Probably between, around 20 to 25% of that is set at conception. That's the genes part.
Mm,
And then the rest of it comes from the life experiences and the environment that you're in between conception and about 3 years old. And
no.
so that the neural pathway, being technical about it, the neural pathways in the brain are largely set by the time you're 3 years old. Now, there's quite a lot of other development still goes on in cementing your emotions and decision making zones, and more. I suppose if you call it brain development, goes on right up through to the point that you're about 18 years old. Then it's fairly, who you are is who you are. But that doesn't mean something can't be changed. But it's harder to change what's
Sure.
been ingrained from earlier. And so this is where we sort of get this distinction between what's relatively automatic that happens in, a nanosecond, if you want to call it that, as a reaction, versus I will stop and pause or check myself before I wreck myself and take maybe 7 seconds to make a decision, which is coming more from learning. And am I experienced enough? Oh, okay, I've got a trigger to stop. And and think about it and then make a choice. And it's not saying that all reactions are bad. A lot of them might be good,
Right.
but that's sort of the formation of the behavior. And now that's forming you as a person. And that's what we call, so the 0 to 3 is what we're sort of saying is your DNA behavior, the very early life hardwired behavior. That's how you shape, that brings your life perspectives, but also that's where your money perspectives tend to follow your life perspectives. Now, we can also have beliefs about money that come later on or get reshaped because of a life event that happens later. But a lot of this goes on very early. People that are spenders and savers from early in life. I look at my two children. One has been predominantly a saver all of her life, and the other one, the younger one, and it's not a birth order thing. He's more of if I've got money, then what can I spend it on?
Right.
And so spending will be something he does and will be a challenge. But then it's how do you talk to him about spending plans or spending for life experiences rather than having a new pair of shoes like other kids in the class have got, right? they're the conversations. But you also want people to spend enough to have good life happiness too. Just saving it all
Right.
doesn't lead to a quality of life either. That can be stressful in its own right. But I think, Chris, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from very early in life. Some is genetics, but not the majority. It's the experiences that happen early in life. And some of us have more that we're aware of, have bigger life experiences between 0 and 3 perhaps than other people do. And you can start to see the impacts of that.
Yeah. No, I do want to point out for the listening audience that Hugh Massie did quote Ice Cube is in his interview. You said you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. I thought that was phenomenal. So, I don't. Do you know about the marshmallow study with Stanford? Are you aware of that?
I've heard of it, but I've not studied it.
So basically, in a nutshell, what they would do is they put these kids in a room with a plate and a marshmallow on it. And they would say, hey, listen, you can eat this now if you want to. It's not against the rules. But if you wait 3 minutes, I got to go out of the room and I'm going to be gone 3 minutes. And when I come back, it could be 3 minutes. It could be more than 3 minutes. I don't remember the time. But anyway, when I come back, if it's still here, I'll give you a second marshmallow and then you can eat them both. And it was basically the study was on delayed gratification. And
Yeah.
what they found was that the kids who would wait for the second marshmallow were so much more likely to, become good like investors and good employees and because they understood the idea of like working towards something instead of just like immediate gratification at an early age. It almost makes me wonder, listening to what you're saying, is if you could almost like take your 2-year-old and your 1-year-old and kind of like play the game with them over and over again. Like, well, do you want it now or do you want it later? To like almost sort of develop that DNA that might be in them. That's very interesting. 3 years old. That's very interesting to me.
Now, I think that if you take 7-year-olds up to 7, Chris, I think you could do exercises like that to help with the shaping, as
Yeah.
much as they probably capable of understanding at that age.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. So, it's obviously there's always a nature versus nurture debate. What percentage of nature, in other words, what percentage of the DNA do you think is responsible for people's financial decisions as opposed to nature?
If I take that nature is 0 to 3 years old because the person really doesn't have a lot of control over how they have developed, or up to 7 years old, then I would say it's 95% nature. And that's because under pressure, it takes over. It is the core of who the person is. Now, will that be the same for everyone? Maybe not, but I think it is predominantly that. And I think if you read the work of Daniel Kahneman, who's now since passed away, he would say that in the book Thinking Fast and Slow. And that's where I got to before he did that book, or before he got his Nobel Prize. That was really what I was seeing with the clients that I had in Australia in the wealth management business. I was watching this going on, and that's what got me to want to be able to measure it.
What inspired you to move from accounting with a wealth management focus to wealth management as the focus? What inspired you to make that? I mean, it's a fairly lateral move, but in the same respect, it's usually two different kinds of people that will manage that.
So I was in accountancy and a tax specialist. And so there is a side of wealth management where taxation, I suppose, is relevant. And really, I think I think there's twofold reason. I felt very comfortable being an advisor to people, being quite a good strategic thinker covering a range of issues. And at the time that I left Arthur Andersen, I happened to also do an MBA. I did my CFP, or equivalent of. It was a diploma in financial planning, but it was recognized essentially as a CFP. I did all of those things pretty much on leaving Arthur Andersen while I was starting the business. And I had been I wasn't, even though I was young, I was investing in things by myself, or for or with my family, probably pretty actively from the age of 20 years old. So a lot
Mm.
of stuff has been going on the side, and so I could bring some of that experience to the table. Now at 30 years old, how much experience do you really have? But I had to use the tax experience a fair bit. And I think that's where when I got to the place of coming up with the behavioral ideas, I definitely saw myself more as a wealth mentor to people rather than an investor. I was not attracted to the idea of people coming to me and saying, well, Hugh, I, I, I'm only worried about investment returns. And I'm thinking, well, if that's how you measure yourself, then this isn't very good. And I wasn't in love with the investment management process, actually. And so that's started to make it pretty easy to go down much more of a behavioral path. But I think I got it to the wealth management because I liked advising people. I had the tax skills, but I was also doing deals or had been doing deals. So I had pretty broad knowledge, really. Probably got a lot broader knowledge today than I had then, of course. But we're talking 25 years and 30 years down the track. But if that gives you the idea, Chris, so of that transition.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And it's very interesting to me that you moved from, accountancy to wealth management and with a background in accountancy, economics, that you didn't become a spreadsheet guy. You didn't become like the guy who checks all the PE ratios and forward thinking everything. And, like that would have been like a really easy shift for you to just become more of a technical analyst when it comes to like investing. And so it's kind of cool that you were like, nope, that's not what I want to do at all. I want to talk to people. I think that's such a cool move. Congratulations on like kind of knowing thyself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could do that work, but it was 8 out of 10, right? It's like I
Yeah,
could do
right.
the investment work. It's 8 out of 10, and I knew I wasn't in love with it. And it was like tax. In a way, I was 8 out of, in the grand scheme of it, I was pretty good at it. But I would say in the grand scheme, I was 8 out of 10.
You know.
And it's up to all of us to find out 10 out of 10.
So yeah, I've heard you mention that before, the 10 out of 10 thing, and I think it's cool. Like, where did you come up with the concept, and then how do you that into your life and try to help other people implement it into theirs?
I've heard, I suppose I've been a good learner. I've been around a lot of entrepreneurs from being in entrepreneurs organization for 25 years or so. So I've listened to people talking about that and you read it, I suppose you read some of it in books. Others gave me that guidance as well, in coaching and informal coaching. I think at the end of the day, the 10 out of 10 comes from the belief that there is one thing in the world that you can do that's probably better than everybody else. And it's a bit like being an Olympian. You learn early in life perhaps that you can be a really good sprinter or you're good at wrestling or whatever it is, and you want to become the world champion in it. I think there's something out there for all of us. Watching the Olympic
Right.
Games inspired me in Sydney in 2000. It somewhat inspired me to that, thinking, yeah, there's something that I can be great at, but I just got to find it. And for some of us, because we're 8 out of 10 at quite a number of things, it's hard to find that at times, as opposed to for others, it's just one thing, and by necessity, they get there really quick. But you've got to have the talents. So the raw talent, that's the natural DNA, and you've got to have the passion for something. And when you can put those two together, where this is where that one thing, your unique gift or unique ability, as said by Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach, is that's where you're going to, and I haven't done Strategic Coach, but I know he talks about that. That's where you're going to find the 10 out of 10.
Right. No, I love that. And I think like we live in a day and age where that's never become more easy to do, you know what I mean, to find some niche and make a living out of it. I had a guest on the show, a friend of mine, Coach Kyle Stelter, and he literally created a business out of thin air, coaching kids how the technique, the technical side of long snapping. And he has guys in the NFL and college and high school, and he is like absolutely. He was like a PE teacher, but then but he was a good long snapper, and so he took this passion for long snapping and turned it into a business. And I mean, he hasn't been teaching for several years because this is his full-time business. I just think we live in a time where if you can find something you're passionate about, you can actually achieve a 10 out of 10 and make money at it. I do believe like, maybe kind of when I was growing up, like, there wasn't access to the tools that there are now. So I think that you had to kind of almost go work for a corporation. You had to almost go work for an Arthur Anderson, or in my case, a Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, to achieve success. And then, and then you'd have like you said, you had a side hustle. You were working on things on the side. I was the same way. You know what I mean? But I think like nowadays, I don't even think you have to have like a W-2 job. I think you can be a side hustle could be your main hustle, which is pretty cool that we live there.
But I think, Chris, I think also times have changed. I think that certainly when I grew up and you did, and we don't need to completely disclose our age or seniority there, but because I still think I'm a young puppy and only halfway through the journey. But I think that when I was finishing, at university, finishing university, the idea was you go and work in a large organization, you get the meal ticket, you learn that the idea of becoming an entrepreneur straight out of university was not even a concept. It wasn't discussed. It was interesting though that when I did leave Arthur Andersen, my mother said to me, "I think you might have done this a few years too late. You probably should have tried this earlier." It's like so that was interesting that in a way I was encouraged to work in a big organization, but maybe I could have jumped out earlier. But it is what it is. But I think there's conditioning. There was conditioning. And today, what you're alluding to is going to college and paying massive school fees or college fees, particularly in America, when there's no guarantee of getting any job, is going to make people think twice. And that employers are going to want you to have skills and be productive out the gate.
Yeah.
And so we are a different world. I think that so entrepreneurship is going to be something that kids are going to have to do in some way, even if it's just starting off with gigs to make ends meet. But this is where wealth creation comes from. I think that, and this is something that, you in the more in the financial advice side of things than I am these days, but that you create wealth from the use of your talents, if you want to call it that, and skills, not necessarily from investing, unless that is where your talents and skills are. And I think that's a part that's sort of forgotten in the overall scheme of wealth creation.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you talk a lot about DNA, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Like, there's no specific, like, we don't know of a particular kind of DNA that some people have and some people don't when it comes to wealth. Is that true, or is there direct links to like, hey, if you have this genetic factor, you're more likely to be, successful?
Yeah, I think we haven't gone to that point of view that there is a gene that's, number or coded
Mhm.
XYZ 1, 2, 3, 4. If you've got that in spades,
Mhm.
that's a strong gene that you're going to make more money than somebody else. No, I don't think so. But I do go back to some people are wired to be a particular way in terms of being more goal driven, creative, risk taking. Their early life experience maybe allows those predispositions to strengthen and they go out there and do something with it.
Yeah, I totally believe that once they, we haven't fully mapped the human genome, and I fully believe that when they do get it out, there's going to be genetics that people have like just a abundance of like, hey, I'm going to be wealthy, and like from a little time you're a little kid. I mean, when I was a little kid, like where you do the memory game where flip over a card and then try to find the other one that matches it and stuff like that. Like I mean, like at 3 years old, I was wiping the floor with everybody on that thing. When by the time I was 5 years old, nobody wanted to play Monopoly with me. By the time I was 7 years old, nobody wanted to play Scrabble with me. Like my brain just liked that stuff so much. And again, you always want to do things that you're good at, right? So like same thing if you're a basketball player when you were a kid and you were shooting baskets and you had a good shot and people said, man, you can really shoot the ball. Like, of course you're going to do that more because you like doing things that you're good at. So I mean, I definitely
I
feel like there's a proclivity for it.
There is a proclivity, and I think that while we're exploring it, that when I came up with the behavioral ideas, and realized that okay, that people have this natural hardwired behavior, it can be measured. I bring in a psychologist. I actually hired her as well to help me work on this in the wealth management business. And then the day comes, okay, what's my business and life going to be? And I can remember sitting down on the floor of my house in Sydney, and I had Carol there, and we were talking about it, and I had to, I just said, look, no one's going to understand this choice I'm about to make because it would be far easier at the time to have stayed with the wealth management business and built it up in Australia and been there. My family and friends are there. That's where I come from. My identity is associated with all of that. But there's something I need to do. My childhood dreams were about having a global business. And, you go back to your natural proclivities or inclinations and what you were doing at 3 years old. I was sitting on the floor playing with my Lego, figuring out, how to build a business empire. It was just there. And I was always talking about it. And it wasn't because I think I was in love with money for the sake of making more money. It was because I was in love with the idea of business
Yeah.
and doing stuff. Today I would say that's the same. The more to the day I die, I'm going to pursue human impact goals, but that happens to mean having a business. And that's it. And that's there, wired into me from very early in life. And I knew when I reflected on those dreams that they're there and they're meant to be pursued. And I think that's there for others. But here's the key point. You've got to have the mindset to want to push through on that. And it's easy not to have that.
Yeah. Now, so you do a lot of leadership coaching as well. Like, do you do that for like bigger companies, right? Like Pepsi and stuff like that.
Yeah, we do it for larger companies, but frankly, it's for any company. And I look at wealth managers are leaders of their clients, and fathers are leaders in their families. I'm not saying the leader either, because mothers are too. But
Amen.
be careful of that. Uh, I think that it's about training everybody to be leaders, not just a person that's running the military or IBM or Intel. That is a part, but there's a lot more leaders out there than that. And in a way, we can all think of ourselves as leaders if we want to think of ourselves that way. That's a
Right.
mindset shift, and that's really what I am part of. So we have structured programs for large companies and medium and smaller companies. I think part of it to me is how do we all shape up as leaders and behave better as leaders?
And so the majority of your business at this point is training financial advisors on, try how to recognize.
Yeah, half the business is with financial advisors, financial services firms talking about the financial type behaviors that we were alluding to at the start, people's predispositions to saving, spending, goal setting, taking risks. How do you customize the communication, from the advisor to the client? So that would be half. Navigating family dynamics, that would be half. And the other half is working with teams, organizations that might be outside financial services. But I think a point that we bring out a lot now, Chris, is that the financial behavior of a leader will be influencing a lot of his or her decisions.
Hmm. Hmm.
How they think
Yeah.
about money when they're making key leadership decisions is a big issue. And in my mind, is driving company profitability. And it's not just in my mind, actually research shows it. So yeah, it was in my mind because I didn't have proof, ultimate proof, until we actually did research study of all the S&P 500 companies, and you could see it in the data, in the linkage between financial behaviors of the leaders and the accounts.
So you're saying like in their personal life, how they manage their finances personally also reflects how they'll be as a manager for the company. Is that what
So
am I hearing that correctly?
let's say that once we know someone's DNA, DNA style and their various factors, sub-factors, who they are essentially, that approach to money will show up personally and it will show up in the company and how they lead a company. If they
Exactly.
are, a spender at the personal level, there will be those attitudes at the corporate level as well.
Oh, that
More
makes
than,
perfect sense.
even though there's budgets, I mean, budgets are what you make budgets to be. That will be there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart. I think that's exactly how it is too. If you see somebody who's just pouring money into R&D, then their personal life, they probably have all the newest Apple stuff too. You know what I mean? They probably that's just how they're
Yeah,
built.
that's how they're
Smart.
built. That's how it shows up. If they're tight with money personally, they're probably tight in the company. So the fiscal control part's very strong.
I noticed we just briefly touched on it, and I'd like to, because I do think it has to the heart of what we're trying to do here at the Healthy Wealth Experience, which is the stress of finances on your health. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Well, going back to my original story there, it was in 2001. One, when I really had all my, my aha experiences and was connecting behavior to and money together. I knew that money caused stress for a lot of people, which is also what kept them would push them back to their hardwired behavior. That you just go to your instinctive zone. But as I've done more research on this over the last 20 years, and particularly in the last few years, money absolutely causes stress for people. There's plenty of research, including from the American Psychological Association and other places around the world. Roughly 75% of people around the world are saying their stress comes from money. And well, what is money? Money is a currency. Money is what you believe it to be, and money is an energy force that's over you 24/7. So some of that stress for people is coming from just outright not having enough. But there's a lot of stress coming for people who actually have money too.
Right.
In,
Right.
what do I do with it? How do I provide for my kids? They've got relationships being impacted by it, business, personal, community. Money is there the whole time. And it is a major stress factor. And so then we look at health. What causes health issues? Stress. Stress accelerates aging.
Right.
Stress gets picked up by, you want to get sort of, by the lower part of your body, particularly, right, in your guts. And we can get to the science of which parts, but money is there impacting you in that way all the time. So if we want to solve the aging problem, yes, we can all take better supplements and go for walks and things, but we've also got to solve the stress part. And that's why, the mental health discussion's a bigger part today. And so, I've been part of think tanks, if you want to call it that, about living longer, and I've set a goal to live to 120. But that does revolve around doing, better exercise and managing that properly, eating, drinking, managing all of those things. But you've also got to manage stress in your mindset.
Right. Right. How do you feel like what is a what is a what is a good tool for someone to manage financial stress? Obviously, they're going to be like, I just need more money. But like how you observe your situation is important. And so what do you recommend for people who are currently like in financial stress?
Well, it probably does depend on why you're in financial stress. I think that's probably that's the first thing, because there are people there that are below the poverty line, and
Yeah.
and and and
Sure.
that's a different stress, because they've got to outright just earn enough income. But they can still alleviate stress by having a different mindset about money. And I think that there for others that who have got enough money, let's say they're over the 125,000 sort of minimum level to be happy type number in the United States. It's then about mindset. It's not, I think one tool is not comparing yourself to some other person.
Mhm.
I think the mental comparisons that go on is a problem. Entitlements is a problem. I think it's about, if you reduce it down, whether you've got money or not got money, it's about what can you do that's making a positive contribution, and not worry about what other people have.
I think that's such a hot take on that is like I think that the enemy there is almost always going to be comparison. I feel like, if you are making $180,000 a year, but you're concerned about the person who does exactly what you do across town who makes 300, well then that causes financial stress. It's not necessary. Like your $180,000 is successful. It just depends on what you're measuring your success against. And so if you're measuring against other people, I think that's where there's a lot of problems. I think that was a really good insight to that. I think that, trying to avoid comparison is probably the number one thing you can do to get away from financial stress.
Yeah, I think that just generally, and there'll be some, I think that's a sort of general proposition across the board. There will be some that people, because of the way they're wired, who are more interested in what other people are doing. They're just interested in people. And so their image is important, their identity is important, and that's going to be something that they do. And there'll be others that can find it easier in a way to stay in their own lane and not worry about it. But they've got different money issues.
Sure. Right. Right. So now I love the idea of my practice, what I'm trying to do is not only take care of people in their current state, but I'm trying to build, generational wealth. I know that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's a very good buzzword, but really, truly, I think that, people can, pile up money and then they can get to their retirement age and then they can spend that money. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. If you want to do that, go ahead. I'm definitely interested in more of the pile up money, spend part of it, keep that money piling, and then get it to the kids below you. You know what I mean? And then they do the same thing. You teach them good habits. You don't just teach them, hey, here's a bunch of fish. You say, hey, here's how I do it. Trying to build that generational wealth. I enjoy that a lot. Do you feel like there's a part in a family's life where they can say, "Hey, listen, I want people to take this assessment. I want to know as a parent what I'm dealing with the kids that I'm raising," or is it mostly just for adults at this point?
No, the most successful formula would be involving the children as well.
Okay, good,
And
good,
that, my kids took the assessment at about age 10 years old, and
great.
it's been pretty accurate. I think that we validated it with kids age 15 and up, or people 15 and upwards, just because they're a little bit more emotionally centered by, 15, 16 years old. And we're able to do that because of the design of the questionnaire, in terms of we're just asking people to choose most and least like between a single word. A kid at 10, 10 is more, certainly at 15 and 16 can choose between aspiring, detailed, and patient, for example. It's not complex life sentences where you've got to interpret it, be educated, and probably experience that situation to rank it. We got none of that in what we do. So it's pretty simple, non-situational assessment. If you can read a little bit, you can answer it. So I would encourage families, everybody in the family, to do it, and then you understand the differences, and then issues don't get built up so much as well. And because I think sometimes people are playing mind games in the family. Well, dad said this to me, and I've got an entitlement to this, and mum's saying that, or kids got a better relationship with one parent than the other. I think that the more you can open out the communication earlier, you can manage the differences that are inherently there in the family. And I think, probably as you've seen it, sometimes it's not going to involve equal amounts of money to each kid, because one might need it for some reason
Mm,
or what. I think you've got to look
mhm,
at special needs very carefully, but each kid, to love them equally, might need to be treated differently. One might need to be on a different education path than another kid, so
mhm.
so they're all philosophies for the family. How the family wants to give away some money is important. What's the family going to spend money on? Life experiences and vacations. Everyone's different when it gets down to their values and their belief systems around that. So it's not for us to judge, I think, but it is up to us to help them manage it and come up with some, the behavioral dynamics and the financial dynamics to provide those inputs. But if we know that the differences in the family, we can work on that. And it might be, as we've alluded to today, there's one kid or one parent that's a big spender that needs to be managed in some way. So I think the more that's known, the easier it is to manage those family dynamics.
Yeah. No, I like that's good. Like, so with my kids, I've always told them as they're growing up, like, if you have something that you want to pursue, like, for vocation or, things like that, like, I will support you in it. So, like for my son, he wants to, play in the NFL someday. And so, we've been doing lessons for long snapping and going to camps. And like, he's currently in the recruiting system. And so that causes us to do a lot of travel, which is expensive, but I, told him I'd support him in his dream. And then with my daughter, she, sort of stopped going to college. Like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I want to take a gap year, which, typically speaking, when you take a gap year, you're usually kind of done. And then for her, but she's an extremely talented artist and she wants to pursue um, tattooing. So we had a little home gym that wasn't really getting much use anyway, unfortunately, because I mean, if I do work out, I usually go for a walk or I'll go to the local gym. But so we turned it into like a studio for her, and now she's like, thriving. And And so, like, what you need to do to support people, like for my son, is drastically more expensive than what I do for my daughter. But it's still, the measurement is still the same. Is that that's what their dream is, and that's why I'm trying to help them with it. So, and I don't really think about the money side of it until this conversation right here. But yeah, I think that's really important to know where your kids are at, and again, know what they want for help. You know what I mean? Instead of just trying to, basically make them all go to college and make them all go do this and make them, you know what I mean? Like, helping these kids find their 10 out of 10 and supporting them on it. I think that's excellent advice. Now, you've written a couple books, but one of the ones you kind of briefly mentioned to me before the show, and you used the word on it, which was money energy. And it's an ebook that people can get for you. Tell me what you mean by money energy. I love the concept behind that.
So I think money energy is going back to in a way to our health and wealth conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
money energy, there's three dimensions of money. Money is a currency. Money is behavioral, which comes from your life perspective. So your behavioral, if you want to call it your behavioral style, directs you to spend and save, take risks, innovate, be detailed or not detailed in relation to money. So in a way, how you deal with it. And then the third part is money is an energy. It's in our thought patterns 24/7, whether we're aware of it or not, where money is at work. And so the phrase money never sleeps is not just about putting money in the bank and letting it compound. It's also about your thought patterns, because if you go to bed with negative thoughts about money or unresolved issues, you're going to wake up with them and go and probably manifest that outcome. And so taking it that money is in your heart, it's in it's through your body, it's through your mind, which then flows out into your decision making. I think it's incumbent on all of us to understand the role that money is playing in our lives, how we align ourselves, to our talents, to our dreams, relationships. Getting our life path right is going to help us deal more positively with the money energy, which is then going to flow through, Chris, to, as we talked about, to your health.
Right.
And again, I suppose if you live in a if you I suppose you could say if you're unhealthy with money, then you're probably going to spend more of it on the wrong things that then boomerangs on you in terms of your physical health and the mental health. It's all going to go down. Or if you just
Yeah.
spend your whole life trying to make more and more money for the sake of it, you're very stressed in the process of it. What's that doing to your health?
Right. Right.
And so it's in a way, I suppose what I'm talking about is that there is a balance there for all of us that we can optimize the overall quality of our life, the longevity of our life. Happiness is wrapped up in that, and the success of it if we get everything in the right zone. I think that's what we should be working towards. And
Yeah.
the life balance, if you want to call it that, is different for all of us, right? That
Right.
zone of what is a balanced life is different for all of us.
It's funny you mentioned the word balance, and that's when you were speaking. That's exactly what kept coming to my mind. Is like we have this. It's almost become such a buzzword that I think it's lost its meaning, which is this like work-life balance. I don't think there really is a work-life balance. I think it's just balance. And if you have balance in your personal life, you can almost always achieve balance in your work life. And vice versa. I think if you're a balanced person in one, you're probably balanced in the other.
Well,
But
and
like
you're a
we
mentally balanced person as well. I think that's the part let's not forget that bit as well. If you're mentally balanced, then that's gonna help in balancing everything out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well said. Exactly where I was headed with it. I just feel like a lot of our issues that we have are self-inflicted wounds. You know what I mean? Like with our health, it's self-inflicted on how we eat and how we exercise. With our wealth, it's self-inflicted on how we spend and how we feel about money. People when they grow up, how they feel about money has a really big factor in how they achieve success. So I love the idea of balance. I think that's really very, and you also mentioned the word manifest. And I do think that, that's a word that people need to become more familiar with, because how you think about things is very productive to like how those things will actually turn out. And we can think about things in a super negative way, or we can think about things in a super positive way. That's up to us. And so I love the idea of balance. I love the idea of energy. I think those are really good terms that should be used when we talk about health and wealth. I think that's excellent. So, like, what I appreciate your time and I want to be respectful of it. I always try to keep people around an hour. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk more about?
I think that we've covered the field pretty much. I think
Hmm.
the thought maybe I leave behind for those listening and, and for you, Chris, is that in the financial planning, wealth management process, I think we've got to get to a place and where where we're far more comfortable to talk about the broader set of issues
Right.
facing our life. And that, um, for example, if you're 65 or 62 and you're planning on retiring, okay, or having the conversation about your health, what might be coming at you potentially in the future, and what do you need to do to invest in staying healthy, I think is an important part of the financial planning process, and it's a part that's easy to forget about or not to address. And then suddenly the health shock comes in, you get a financial shock, or maybe vice versa. But I think that the retirement planning needs to take into account health planning, and if you're retiring at 62 or 65, you've probably got a lot more years left in your life today with modern
Mhm.
medicine than there was in the case in prior generations. That's only going to get more and more true uh, as time goes along.
Yeah, and so like, going to like the idea of retiring 62, 65, those are numbers that, we've been using around for a really long time. And my thought on that is like, if you look at people, and you take 2 70-year-olds and put them side by side, they're 1 70-year-old probably could work for another 15 years and be happy with it. And the other one, they're kind of done. And I think that the biggest factor of that is usually their health, either mental or physical health and well-being. So um, I don't know that I ever really want to retire necessarily. I might transition my business. I might take on less clients. I might focus more on the podcast. Well, those are the kinds of things that I don't know. But I do know that at 53 years old, like I don't plan on being done at 62. I plan on going to something that I can continue to do and keep active with, or at least be active in the community or something like that. I do have one question for you before we go. I just think like if you could analyze the sort of the DNA of any billionaire in the world, like an Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, or Mark Cuban, who would you love to know more about their DNA, their DNA wealth part?
Well, out of those three, Mark Cuban.
Yeah, that's awesome. That would have been my choice too, by the way.
I've learned more about the other two. I could go and use our product on Mark Cuban, like we do digital scans of people. So in fact, I've done so that's a sort of a system we built to get past the friction of someone having to complete the DNA behavior profile. We now can do it digitally. We've built
Hmm.
metrics to do that, the technology. So I've done that on Elon Musk. I've studied Bill Gates and Warren Buffett for quite a long time. Mark Cuban is the more interesting one that I
Interesting. I
haven't
love that.
studied in
Do you
that
have any
way.
insights on like an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates that you would want to share with people?
Well, they're more driven people. I think definitely. Elon being, much more of a, if you want to call it, authoritarian influencer type player, extremely creative. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
enormous talents that just need to keep being channeled to the right things that for deployment into big businesses. I think Bill Gates would have had some of those same traits, but he's channeling it more these days to his philanthropic missions.
Right. That's
But
true.
they're but they're
Yeah.
but it's not that he's not doing anything either. I mean, he's probably the biggest landowner in the United States.
Right.
He's channeled himself into a whole lot of areas, but he's probably not innovating in the same way that he did, whereas Musk is still in the innovation phases.
Right. Right. I agree. They're just at different stages of their lives. Yeah. Um, so with Mark Cuban, let's just put this out there on the air since this has many channels that's going on, is that, Mark, if you're out there and you're listening, we would love to do a DNA scan on you for your behavior on wealth and financial decision making. So tag Mark in the comments, please. Hugh, it's excellent having you on the show. I do feel like this is like kindred spirit stuff. We both feel very strongly that health and wealth are intertwined. And I just think that how you feel about those things is also intertwined. Now, where can we get a hold of you for, for the DNA assessments and things like that? Where can we go to find you?
Yeah, the best place to come and find me is at dnabehavior.com. That's our website. All the materials, thinking, booklets, ebooks, assessments, everything can be found there. Plenty about me if you want to learn more about Hugh is there, including my profile is there. So I'm an open book on all of that. And, if you want to anyone wants to email me, just email me at dnacare@dnabehavior.com and I'll get back to you.
Love that. Thank you for telling us about that. So I will definitely put those in the show notes, everybody, so you guys can click on the links. And then he also mentioned a couple of books, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah, it's by Daniel Kahneman. I think if you want to understand behavior, I think that's a good
Hmm.
book to understand the hardwired behavior, the types of behavioral biases that you might have.
They can get access to your books through your website as well, though, right?
Through the website or at Amazon, either place,
Okay.
it's fine.
Well, we'll link to those as well then. We'll link to those books as well. And so just if you guys have any more questions, please reach out to Hugh, leave comments and then show notes, and we'll be happy to answer them. I'm very active with the comments when people take their time out of their day to say something. I usually try my best to be thoughtful on the way back. And you guys know the drill. This is an algorithm. Our success is based on how much you like this. So liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, all of those fun things that people talk about all the time, that helps us expand our reach and get more people out there. And along those same lines, I always ask people in the comments, if you have something or someone specifically that you would love to hear more from, let us know. We would love to try to get them on the show. We are here for you guys. So if this is entertaining to you, that's the goal. If it's informative for you, that's the goal. And if you find something that's more entertaining, more informative, let us know and we'll try to get them on the show. So with that being said, thank you so much, Hugh. I just got a ton of value out of this. I hope other people did as well. I know they did. And just once again, thank you for being on the show.
Pleasure, Chris.
All right. Well, have a good day, and everybody have a good day.